Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so delighted, so honored to be here. I'm hopefully going to be sharing some information with you that some of it may be information that you're already familiar with, and some of it may be brand new. But I think the more we know about covert abuse and coercive control, the safer everybody will be. I'm going to share my screen, and then hopefully you've got a nice view of the hills to get you all sort of relaxed in the zone. And let me get our the first slide going here. Okay, it's going to be a two-part workshop. Today I'm going to be talking about covert abuse and coercive control and what it looks like when especially when it's perpetrated by a powerful, sophisticated abuser. And in Silicon Valley, you're no doubt going to run into survivors living in just this kind of relationship. So the more we talk about it, the more we shine a light on it, the safer your clients will be and their children as well. So my name is Ruth Darlene. I'm the founder and executive director of Women of Silicon Valley, WomenSV for short. It was created in Los Altos. It started in Los Altos. It's still based there, but I do most of my work remotely now. And we have women that reach out to us from all over the country. And I do trainings for a lot of different providers, for therapists, for physicians, for court staff, for law enforcement, about covert abuse and coercive control, since it's so little talked about, but it's has such a pervasive impact on survivors and their children. So let's dive in. If you want to learn more beyond the scope of what I'm able to talk about today and next week, please check out our website, womensv.org. So our mission is all about empowering survivors and providers and the community with education about covert abuse and coercive control. And I will be, if you're not clear about those terms stay tuned, because I'll be going into detail about it in just a few moments. The women that we work with, and we work primarily with women. I've had about a dozen male clients over the past 13 years, but my area of expertise is in women, hence the name WomenSV, Women of Silicon Valley. The women that we work with, they are engineers, physicians, therapists, professors. You see the list of the survivors that we serve. Their abusive partners are engineers, physicians, therapists, professors. You see the professions of the partners that they are involved with. So domestic violence, coercive control, they know no boundaries when it comes to profession or religion or race or gender or sexual orientation. Anybody can be a victim of this type of abuse, and anybody can be a perpetrator. So I'll be talking about a few caveats in a moment, but keep that in mind to change the pronouns as you see fit. Here's some examples of where we do trainings and interviews talking about this issue to hopefully raise awareness, not just amongst survivors or the general public, but amongst providers about these more subtle forms of abuse and the impact they have on survivors, including their children. So I'm not a therapist. I'm not a lawyer. I do trainings for therapists and for attorneys because they get so little training in the area of covert abuse and coercive control. Today, I'll tell you some stories because I'm Irish and I can't help it. But when I'm talking about survivors, I'll be using the pronoun she. When I'm talking about perpetrators, I'll be using the pronoun he. But please feel free to adjust the pronouns as you see fit, because as I said, no gender is immune to domestic violence or coercive control. We don't charge for our services. We are donation-based because we're a nonprofit. But if you know anybody that wants to support the work, please send them to our website, womensv.org, because it's all about keeping the program going and continuing to spread the word. Here's what we're going to cover today. We'll start with a few statistics. We'll go on to definitions of domestic violence and coercive control. We'll take a look at what it looks like in family court. We will do a deep dive into the profile of a sophisticated abuser and a sophisticated survivor, what it looks like in the affluent areas that we live in. We'll cover some forms of abuse like financial and technological, and we'll save probably the pathway to violence and pathway to freedom for next week when we talk about interventions. But that's what we're going to try and cover today. So some disturbing statistics. Did you know that 1 in 3 women on the planet will be severely beaten or raped during her lifetime? 1 in 3 women. And we all know more than 3 women, or more than 2 since we're 1, if for the women in the class today. So that doesn't even begin to cover the more subtle forms of abuse that we're going to be addressing today. So with the clients that you're serving, you can bet that you are going to come across women who are suffering from this type of abuse, perhaps physical and sexual violence. And very often that will include, if not always, a form of domestic emotional abuse, as well as financial or legal or technological abuse. So the type of abuse that doesn't always leave forensic evidence behind, but can be very damaging and dangerous for the entire family nonetheless. And we all know that, or many of us know that 1 in 5 women will be a victim of of sexual assault during her college years. But not everybody knows that 1 in 5 women will also be a victim of intimate partner violence, IPV, or intimate partner abuse during her college years. And did you know that domestic violence is a leading cause of injury amongst women and a leading cause of death amongst pregnant women? So one of the things she has to fear the most while pregnant is her partner, if he is an abuser. And about over 30% of female patients who show up at the ER are there for domestic violence related injuries. And so physicians are going to, they need much more training in identifying the difference between somebody who fell down the stairs and someone who was pushed. You may be familiar with this equality wheel. If we can start with this sort of baseline of what does it look like to be in a relationship where both partners are treating each other equally. There's the sense that it's safe to bring up topics. There's a sense of respect on both sides, that you trust the person that you're with. You can be honest and authentic, and you're going to share parenting responsibilities. You're going to share responsibilities in general. If you're good at cooking, maybe you want to make the meals. And if he's good at the financial part, or she's good at the financial part, then your partner may handle the financial part. And that's called teamwork. But there's that, the understanding of trust and mutual accountability and shared responsibility. So that's the basis of a relationship based on equality. But what happens when that's not the case? And that's when we get the abuse of all of these things, the abuse of power in order to control an intimate partner. And it could mean intimidating her, punching the wall, not necessarily her, but the wall, to show her that, well, if you don't toe the line or get it, do what you're told, you could be next, or hurting the children or hurting a pet in order to hurt her, putting her down, humiliating her, shaming her, isolating her from her, cutting her off from her extended family members and friends, denying what he's done to hurt her, putting it back on her, projecting it onto her, minimizing the damage that he's done, using the children, turning them into pawns or spies, or trying to turn them against her, using male privilege, behaving like the king of the castle, where she's treated like a servant, putting her on an allowance, financial abuse, or she's not even allowed to see the income tax return. He just says, sign here, or he'll sign it for her. Hiding some of his finances, so she has no idea what the household income is, and forcing her to do things that she shouldn't have to do, or not letting her do things that she should be able to do. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. There's often this pattern of abuse that emerges. This is one particular pattern. There are others, but here is one pattern that can become clear if she starts to keep a journal, even bullet point form. He will often if he is a covert abuser or a perpetrator of domestic violence or abuse, she will probably meet him during the honeymoon period when it's all hearts and flowers and he's on his best behavior. And these public displays of affection and these grand gestures that woo her and win her. But over time, she may start to feel tension mounting and like she's afraid to bring up certain topics. So she, you could cut the tension in the room with a knife and then something happens. It could be this verbal explosion or a physical or sexual attack. But very often she'll encounter something that shows her that she has crossed the line or done something that has upset him or made him angry, and she's having to pay the price for it. And then he may go back to, once he's cooled off, to being that charming person that she fell in love with. And this can be very confusing for somebody with an open heart who is capable of self-reflection. Because this type of abuser will weaponize her very best qualities, including her ability to look within and say, is there something I've done to set him off or to make him say those things? Or is he operating out of his childhood wounds? I know he experienced trauma when he was growing up. Can I forgive what happened? Is it just a one-off? If she keeps a journal, she may see over time it's not a one-off. And here's something that's key. The cycle that happens, the cycle of abuse that happens, those periods when he goes back to being nice or not calling her names or not waking her up in the middle of the night or maybe even bringing her flowers or telling her he loves her, those periods of peace are going to keep her in the relationship. That intermittent reinforcement, Las Vegas has made a fortune on it because every now and you keep trying and every now and again you hit the jackpot, but the house always wins, right? But with this type of relationship, if she keeps track of it over time, she will see that even those periods of peace are part of the control because they are what keep her in the relationship, raising that false hope that he will go back to being the man she fell in love with. Meanwhile, she's in this in a profession or a career or has this public image herself or this idea that she's a successful professional woman. There'll be tremendous shame attached to feeling like she's failing at this part of her life when she's been successful at so many other parts. And that shame and the social stigma attached to domestic violence in more affluent areas, they're going to conspire to keep her silent and make her afraid to reach out, reluctant to reach out for help. She's going to spend a lot of her life walking on eggshells, trying to see if there's something that she can do to fix things. So what does domestic violence involve as far as the federal definition? The Department of Justice or Office of Violence Against Women are concerned. They have expanded the definition of domestic violence in the current administration. In the previous administration, it went back to being only felonies and misdemeanors. So keep an eye on the Department of Justice and whoever wins the next election, how is that going to impact the Department of Justice's definition of domestic violence? But now it includes physical, sexual, emotional, financial, psychological, technological abuse. Or look at this, the last point here includes any behaviors that intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, frighten, terrorize, coerce, threaten, blame. You see, I don't have to touch you in order to do all those things. And then hurt, injure, or wound someone, or someone the person loves, right? Or a pet. That's the federal version. Now let's look at the state law, how much more limited that is. So look at these two competing definitions, which the California definition of state law basically boils down to felonies and misdemeanors. Abuse means intentionally or recklessly causing or attempting to cause bodily injury or placing another person in reasonable apprehension of imminent serious bodily injury to himself or another. Himself or herself, shouldn't it say? Yeah. But here's the hope. I always like to move from despair into hope because that's what keeps us alive and continuing to do the work, right? We always have to keep hope alive in ourselves and in the people that we're serving. But with Family Code 6320, we have new hope for domestic violence survivors. What has it done? In family court, it has expanded the definition of domestic violence by expanding the definition of disturbing the peace to include coercive control, which is specifically called out in Family Code 6320, saying that it is a pattern of behavior. Pattern is a key word here, that it unreasonably interferes with a person's free will and personal liberty. And Evan Stark wrote a whole book about that, PhD in the sociology. He was really the torchbearer when it comes to putting coercive control on the map in the United Kingdom, in Canada, and here in the United States. But his book, it's a textbook, heavy reading, but it's very important if you want to learn more about what it involves. But he calls coercive control a liberty crime because it deprives a person of their fundamental human right to enjoy peace and safety in their personal life. His book, Coercive Control, the subtitle is How Men Entrap Women in Personal Life, because coercive control tends to be a gender-based crime, even though they took the gendered language out of it in order to pass the law in California Family Court. Keep in mind that coercive control tends to be a gender-based crime perpetrated by men against women. And it also involves, you'll see, technological abuse and financial abuse and emotional abuse. Because all of these things disturb the peace of an individual. It also involves isolating her, making it hard for her to socialize or be with her other friends and extended family members, depriving her of basic necessities like medication, money, food, shelter, transportation, like hiding her car keys on the morning of her important interview, or withholding medication if she's got a chronic health issue. So one of our survivors, she had a life-threatening asthma condition. And the night she told her husband that she was wanted a divorce, things ramped up. She got very upset as he was towering over her, intimidating her, threatening her. She had a full-blown asthma attack, went to search for her inhaler, and guess what? She couldn't find it. It had gone missing. Go figure. And then she goes to call 911, and he says, "Don't call for an ambulance. I will take you to the hospital. Let's not waste time waiting for an ambulance." Sounds good in theory, right? She gets in the car with him. Her throat is closing up, and he drives 5 miles an hour all the way to the hospital. And she reports later, all the while with an eerie smile on his face. There's a term for that, duping delight, or schadenfreude, right? That satisfaction that a person feels witnessing or even causing the suffering of another. For me, that transcends any kind of diagnostic label that one might put on someone like this, and we are entering the realm of evil. And as Christian counselors, I'm so glad that you have that kind of faith-based foundation for your practice, because when you're dealing with a covert abuser, you have entered the realm of evil. And therapy, psychology, it does so much good, and it capable of so much healing for trauma survivors. But how long has psychology been around for? Maybe 150 years. How long has evil been around for? Ever since the Garden of Eden. And before that, Lucifer got kicked out of heaven for wanting to take over God's position. But even the Garden of Eden wasn't all the Garden of Eden. There was the serpent. So it walks amongst us, bright and shiny, God's most beautiful angel, and the one that he had to banish from heaven for his pride, for his obsession with power. And that hasn't changed throughout the ages. We're talking about the type of person who is obsessed with power and will do anything it takes to maintain that power and abuse it in order to control an intimate partner, all the while looking bright and shiny out in public. Continuing Family Code 6320, and please Google it and read the whole text of the law. I'm picking the highlights out here. Compelling somebody to do something they shouldn't have to do, like going back to work a couple of weeks after she's given birth by cesarean section to twins, or not letting her go to work if she wants to go back to work, or forcing her to get an abortion if she's wanting to have that next child. Controlling her, the reproductive coercion, something called stealthing, secretly taking off the condom during intimacy. Yeah, anything that he can do to prove that he is in control and in charge of her, even her body. So coercive control, the takeaway here is its pattern of threatening, isolating, controlling behavior. And it takes away a woman's autonomy, and this behavior can range anywhere from gaslighting, emotional, psychological manipulation. We'll talk more about gaslighting in a moment, all the way to near fatal, non-fatal, and fatal strangulation, and everything in between. It is a lethality risk. And why? Well, it's turning a woman into an object, into a possession, into a resource, something to use and use up. And as a possession, what is the ultimate right of property possession? The right to dispose of it. And that's what makes coercive control a lethality risk. It's also, I call it the ultimate form of identity theft, because it robs a woman of all the things she was before entering into this type of relationship. It robs her of her autonomy, her independence, her self-esteem, her confidence, her happiness, her spontaneity, her creativity. I have so many survivors. I've worked with over 1,400 women in the past 13 years, and so many of them report that all of their creativity dried up in the relationship, even if they were artists or prolific writers before. It's hard to create when you have someone trying to destroy you. Remember, it's a pattern versus an event. And in the law, it talks about establishing the totality of the circumstances. So, of course, strangulation, that's a one event that will certainly qualify, for a restraining order. But more often in covert abuse, you'll see a pattern emerge, and she wants to establish the pattern of behavior that is making her feel afraid and unsafe in her personal life. Often it involves micromanagement around traditionally female tasks, household duties, meal preparation, childcare, grocery shopping, the way she keeps house. She gets turned into, have you seen the movie Stepford Wives? That's what they are aiming for. So she could easily be replaced by somebody else, a robot. And look at what artificial intelligence and sex dolls and robots are becoming these days. It's a scary world that we're entering. If you've ever seen The Terminator, things are happening. Sometimes movies can be horrifyingly predictive. Another statistic in our organization, I didn't start by keeping track of the number, but it came up and emerged in so many of our intakes that we did start tracking it in about 40%, and maybe even higher. But this is a conservative estimate. 40% of our 1,400 women that we've served have experienced non-fatal strangulation at the hands of their partner, their doctor, lawyer, faith leader, therapist, partner, physician, partner. And how disturbing that is. Talk about cognitive dissonance, trying to hold two ideas, concepts, notions, personalities that are opposite in your head at the same time. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you've got both of them. Here's Dr. Jackie Campbell. PhD in nursing from Johns Hopkins University, who created the danger assessment. We'll talk about that next week. That's a really important assessment to do with your survivors. But she said from all the women that, the cases that she'd studied who ended up getting murdered by their partner, many of them had been in the system prior. What she found was that if a woman is strangled even one time, she's much more likely to end up being killed by her partner. And it counts if it happens in the bedroom. And some women don't realize that. Many women don't realize that her partner is trying out things that he's learned from watching online pornography. And it could start off with a hand on the chest and slowly move up to the neck and then start to squeeze. And when it's incremental like that, and part of what happens in the bedroom, it can be very hard for her to identify that as abuse. And it's not just abuse, it's not just violence, it's attempted murder when a man puts his hands on a woman's throat, no matter what room it happens in. So here's some obvious forms of coercive control, saying things like to his partner, like, I love you so much. If you ever leave me, I will hunt you down and kill you. And after a woman shared that threat with a friend, her friend said to her, "Oh, isn't that sweet? That's like so romantic. He loves you so much. He doesn't, he doesn't want you to be with anybody else." That is not healthy, that kind of response. Or if you leave me, I will tell all your friends how crazy you are. They set out to discredit her. Or here, put this app on your phone. Add me to find my friends so I know where you are. Stalking. Or tell me all your passwords, hand them over. You've got nothing to hide, share it. No, share it with me. No, you are not going to spend a weekend with your friends. Or no, you can't have any friends of the opposite sex on any of your social media. Unfollow them right now. Here, let me watch you. Or when I call, how come it took you so long to pick up the phone? You better answer on the second ring. Or here, sign this. The income tax return or a quit claim deed to the property that she should have, a joint ownership of, or I will cut off your stipend. It's pretty obvious, right? These threats, the controlling behavior. And it could be physical, the fist, the punch, the slap, the shove, or brandishing a knife or a gun, or threatening to run her over with his truck this afternoon. This is what police are looking for, the obvious signs of physical violence. Even with one of my survivors, I spoke with the district attorney. This was in another county. And as he was talking about my survivor who'd been raped by her husband while pregnant, he said, rape is very hard to prove because there's no witnesses. Like just how low can we set the bar for protecting women in that kind of situation? And it's not all that long that that marital rape has been become illegal. And back in the day, women actually belonged to men. It was part of the law of coverture that women and children were possessions of their male partner, their husband. So we still have a long way to go in terms of achieving total equality. So other things like keeping her up all night to rant and rave at her, or destroying her personal property, smashing her cell phone or her laptop, or stopping her from leaving a room, or harming her child or her pet. So these are pretty obvious forms of abuse. But then how about the more covert forms? Like, so a woman she's working on her laptop, and she's got a funny feeling about the emails, some of which appear to have been read. And her husband comes into the room and she says to him, "Have you been reading my emails?" And he says to her, looking very offended, "I never touched your computer." So that's the truth, but it's not the whole truth and nothing but the truth. You know why? He didn't have to touch her computer. He was grabbing her cell phone while she was in the shower. So with these guys, it's not just what they say, it's what they don't say that you have to take into account. And even when they're being helpful, are they being helpful? Or are they looking for a way to monitor you? Here, let me install that software for you. And if he's a cybersecurity expert and she's an artist, maybe it makes sense. But what she doesn't realize is he's also installed keystroke logging software on her, along with the virus protection software on her computer. So that even if she's changing her passwords, he's going, oh, okay, so that's her new password. Or her husband goes away on a trip and then he says, or her boyfriend before they're married, and he goes, oh, I love you so much, baby. Do you love me? Can you prove it? Can you send me a picture? You know what I mean? One that shows me how much you really love me. And is she getting that pressure to send him an intimate image of her that could be used against her later? Or talking to their children, talking to a son or a daughter, do you really think you're ready to try out for that team? You really think you can, get into Stanford? Or, you really think you're ready for that GPA course class? Or to an adult partner, you really think that you're ready for that job promotion or to apply for that job? Or talking to the kids, you don't want to see me mad. Or to her, or to his wife, you don't want to see me mad. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Or she sees him doing something like tripping their 3-year-old daughter, because the 3-year-old daughter has started to cry and dad's getting annoyed and he's getting angry and he's taking it out on the 3-year-old, and the little child sticks out his foot. Dad sticks out his foot and trips the child. And mother tries to call him out on it. He goes, I didn't. The kid tripped. Clumsy kid. I would never do that. I would never do that. Look for that conditional language where he's starting to rewrite history. And if she's feeling like a prisoner, if she's gotten isolated and has no friends or outside people to do a reality check with, if she's sleep deprived, she's living in this state of chronic fear, over time, he can cause her to see reality the way he wants her to see it. That is a master manipulator, a champion of gaslighting. She's trying to tell him, this is what happened. No, that's not what happened. That's not how it happened. Denying reality. Or you might want to talk to somebody. You've been under a lot of stress lately, starting to make her question herself, her hold on, her sanity. Sneaky things like putting a hidden camera on her smoke detector or the keystroke logging software, or just cutting her off. She asks a question. It's like, what, did somebody say something? Or only communicating with her via text message or putting a note on the fridge. That's happened with some of my survivors, where it's been like 6 months or a year before their partner would start talking to them again. Covert threats. One is a rose, not a rose. So a woman says to her husband, why don't you ever bring me flowers? And he says to her, flowers are for funerals. I'll bring you flowers when you're dead. She eventually escapes from her partner, gets a restraining order against him, sets up in a new place, got a nice apartment with next door neighbors. She's in the Safe at Home program. You can check into that with California. You can enroll in it if you're a victim of domestic violence. She thinks that she's safe now with her Safe at Home program and her restraining order and getting to know her next door neighbor. And then she opens the door one day, and what does she find delivered to her front door? Can you guess? A dozen roses with no note, but she knows who it's from. And her next door neighbor is wondering, why do you look so upset? Look, he's trying to make friends. This is a peace offering. Isn't that sweet? And doesn't understand why she has suddenly gone pale and started to shake. You understand the hidden message. She understands the hidden message. The next door neighbor doesn't. A police officer probably will not. It's a violation of the restraining order. But by a covert abuser, it passes as a peace offering. That is called symbolic aggression. Another style of covert abuse is saying something to her like, well, Okay, here is a man and a woman, husband and wife, going through a divorce. Everything's looking good as they are in this settlement officer conference, an SOC with a temporary judge who's moderating. She's got her attorney, he's got his attorney. There's a pro tem judge watching over everything. Things are going fine. She's got her PTSD under control. And then they start talking about financial distribution, property settlement. And he says, in this very kind of, calm, concerned way, husband says, all I want here is clear communication. And suddenly she goes cold. She starts to shake and she says, okay, you can have this, you can have that. She walks away with virtually nothing, giving him everything. And why is that? Comes out later that always in the past, whenever he would beat her, he would say to her, I wouldn't have to do this if you were capable of clear communication. She got the message. That's the dog whistle. Or the child where his father is teaching him how to ride a bike, gets impatient with him, and gives the kid such a shove, he falls off the bike and chips a tooth. The tooth falls out. He tells the teacher at school that day. Teacher calls CPS. There's an emergency screening. Dad is with the child until the emergency screening and says to the child, you know, the reason why your tooth fell out is you just fell off the bike. Yeah, I was teaching you how to ride a bike. You just fell, and that's how your tooth fell out, right? So that's the truth. That's what really happened. So just remember to tell the truth over and over again. Dad is saying that, not that he shoved the kid so hard that, the kid, he caused the child to lose a tooth. It's you fell off your bike, and that's how it happened. And as dad is leading son to into the waiting room, and then the screener comes out to say next, to talk to the child separately, dad gives the child a hug and says, remember, son, just tell the truth. Mission accomplished. How about this one? It's one thing for a man to tell his best friend while on his deathbed, take care of my wife, will you? It's another for a man with underworld connections to tell one of his minions after his wife has told him she wants a divorce, take care of my wife for me, will you? You see how the same words can convey such a different message depending on who says them and what the context is. Context is everything. I was an English lit major, a teacher before becoming a domestic violence advocate, and I used my training in language every day to look beneath the surface, to look at and listen to innuendo, double entendres, puns, how messages can be read both ways, depending on context. Because it's not just what they say, it's what they don't say. And they are masters at manipulation, psychological manipulation, masters at gaslighting, all the things they say. I was just joking. Can't you take a joke? You're so sensitive. I got to walk on eggshells. I'm feeling abused here. It starts so subtly. It just creeps up on you little by little. And that's what makes it so hard to identify, because in the beginning, it's all hearts and flowers. It's all grooming and love bombing, like that grooming behavior, much like pedophiles groom children. It's all about establishing trust and giving them gifts and grand public displays of affection. With pedophiles, it's not the creepy guy in the trench coat hiding in the bushes at the playground you got to watch out for. It's Uncle Eddie, it's dad, it's cousin. So, but it happens little by little over time. And that's what makes it so hard to identify, especially in our privileged area where domestic violence isn't supposed to happen. The culture of affluence. We all come from different cultures. I'm Irish and Scottish, and the Irish, like, we put men on a pedestal, right? In the old days, we're getting more liberated now. But what's the culture of affluence? It's like, what is culture? A series of expectations and pressures and taboos and traditions. So we think in the culture of affluence, you're going to go to a good school, get good grades, you're going to meet a nice guy, you're going to climb your own ladder of success, settle down in a nice house in a nice neighborhood. So where does failure fit into that picture, or where does domestic violence fit into that picture? Here's Dr. Martin McNeil with his family of 8. We'll talk about him in a minute. But what does a survivor look like? What does an abuse victim look like? And I'm not talking about victim mentality here. I'm talking about crime victim. Because not all of them survive. All these beautiful women on the top row all became the ultimate victim of domestic violence. I serve on the domestic violence death review team, and I know what the ultimate act of domestic violence looks like. They experienced it. And here on the bottom, they've all experienced domestic violence and coercive control. Beautiful Carmen Dow from Los Gatos here lost her son. Her husband killed himself and their son. Senator Susan Rubio is the driving force behind Family Code 6320. She's the reason why we have Family Code 6320. Domestic violence survivor, coercive control survivor, Senator Susan Rubio, and also instrumental in getting that law on the table. Actor, Hollywood actor, and covert abuse, coercive control survivor, Evan Rachel Wood. So looking at survivors' behavior, demeanor, they may look frazzled, scattered, not coming like deer in the headlights kind of look. And it could be from trauma, sleep deprivation. It could be head trauma if they've been punched or strangled. They could minimize it, explain it away. She will often minimize the violence, so will he. She may not have told anyone because of the shame, the huge shame and social stigma. She may not even recognize some of the behaviors we're talking about as abuse. Oh yeah, he's a little controlling, but you know, he's a good father. You can't be a good father if you're not a good husband, because you're teaching a child how a husband treats a wife, how a father treats a mother, how a man treats a woman. They all go together. The smarter a woman is, the longer she tends to stay in this type of relationship, thinking there's something that she can do to make things better. She may appear very confident on the surface or outside in the professional world and be walking on eggshells, living like a prisoner at home. And she'll feel very hypocritical about that, but she's doing what she needs to do to survive. She'll often blame herself. And she may start off wanting to cooperate with the police if it ever comes to that. And eventually she might become a reluctant witness because he will get to her, or she'll feel sorry for him, or the shame, or he'll make all kinds of promises about changing. She may appear very over the top, highly emotional, or she may appear just talking about the worst things in this sort of flat affect. And either one of those can affect her credibility. And her religious background could influence her perception as well. So the end result is sharing many of the same symptoms that prisoners of war experience: PTSD, anxiety, depression, sometimes suicidal ideation from being treated like a prisoner. And why does she stay? There's so much fear attached to it. What will happen if she leaves? Is he going to try to destroy her? Is he going to take the children away? Is he going to hunt her down? Over 50% of women who end up homeless are homeless as a result of domestic violence. And maybe she still on some level loves him, but that's when we've got to talk about what love is. But look at the impact on survivors and their children from physical injury to, chronic pain, headaches, fainting, seizures, digestive issues, blood pressure problems. When a survivor goes to the doctor, and if she gets diagnosed with cancer, one of the things they ask is, have you been under significant stress in the last couple of years? Stress will take a terrible toll on your immune system. She may be coming to you for anxiety or depression or alcohol abuse, some kind of addiction. She may have suicidal thoughts. It's so important to dig beneath the surface to say, is this an organic condition that she's experiencing? Is it from her childhood? Or is there something going on in her life now with her partner that we need to look at more closely? These are all consequences of living with an abuser. And you probably already know all the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, but that's what can happen as a result of living like a prisoner. This is Judith Herman, who you may be familiar with, psychiatrist who's has expertise in trauma and childhood trauma and sexual trauma. She says prolonged, repeated traumatic experiences that produce complex trauma occur only in circumstances of captivity, as in prisoners of war, hostages, and women and children in abusive situations. So that child might end up getting diagnosed with ADD or ADHD or acting out, bullying, or not participating or withdrawing, lots of different behavioral symptoms. But you know, ADD and ADHD, they're behavioral diagnoses. And is it because their brain is working differently? Could be. But could they be thinking about what's going on at home? And is that what's making it so hard for them to concentrate? So when they do reach out for help, if police or therapists are not trauma informed, it's going to impact their credibility if they leave important things out, like, oh, he strangled me last night. Why didn't you mention that? Well, I was thinking about the fact that he was threatening to run over me today. It can be easy to see her as paranoid, delusional, as having some kind of mental health issue. This is Nancy Marshall, MFT, who ran the Domestic Violence Intervention Collaborative. She says victims of domestic violence can look like they have a personality disorder or mental illness when they are in fact suffering the effects of trauma caused by the abusive relationship. We'll talk about more next week about recognizing when a victim is in a trigger state and how to respond. And you'll get a copy of all these slides so you can review them in more detail later. Watch out for the cultural expectations and pressures that make it hard. I had a beautiful Japanese survivor who, even when her partner had put his hands on her throat, she didn't want to scream. She lived in an apartment building and she was afraid of waking the neighbors. It was all about concern for other people. Her parents weren't abusive to her, but she grew up thinking your life is to serve others. Or the British, one of my British ladies who, you just don't talk about your dirty laundry. And in the South Asian community, this pressure to keep the family together and to honor the man, even if he's flawed. That's still, we have a lot of patriarchy throughout the world in many different cultures. And one of my Russian ladies said, why would I call the police? They'll only come if you're dead. And here we have this beautiful young soul, Yardley Love, she was a lacrosse champion, and her boyfriend, who was also a lacrosse champion, they were about ready to graduate from college. He strangled her and killed her. And in his confession said, I may have grabbed her neck. The throat is the most vulnerable area of a mammal. That's why in the animal kingdom, the predators will go after the throat of the victim. It takes more pressure to open a can of Coke than it does to cut the blood supply off to the brain. Very delicate area. It's just what Jackie Campbell warned about. And how do you tell what a covert abuser looks like? You can't tell by looking. All of these men have committed domestic violence, except I don't know about the guy that looks like the most likely candidate here. The guy with the beer bottle and his wife beater. But all of these men have committed domestic violence. Everybody in the top row, the ultimate act of domestic violence, including Dr. Martin McNeil and Rotary Club President Bob Bashara, and football legend, where he's found guilty in a civil court, and of course, Gabby Petito's boyfriend, Brian Laundrie. And most recently in San Mateo, this former Meta executive, artificial intelligence expert, high-tech engineer who killed his wife and 2 children. Anything in the hands of a covert abuser can become a weapon. I've had a woman who reported that her husband had taken the beach towel and wrapped it around her son's throat and pulled it. Another threw a screwdriver at his son. Remote control at the head of his wife. Upended a desk onto his wife. Another one stuffed a sock down the throat of his girlfriend. Another woman reported that her husband had told her about, in their apartment building, a woman that had died by falling down a staircase, tripped by her little doggy and fell down to her death. And he seemed fascinated by that. And a week later, she's passing her husband on the staircase and the dog is on the staircase and there's some jostling that happens and she nearly falls. Had the railing not been there, who knows what would have happened. But how chilling that was to her, that it almost was reenacted in her situation. So these guys, the covert abuser, they tend to be educated, sophisticated, they present well in public. They're good at convincing others that their partner's crazy. They tend to be motivated by sex, money, revenge, power. They lack empathy, remorse, self-reflection, moral maturity, conscience. Can you think of diagnostic labels as I'm citing all these behaviors? What diagnostic labels come to mind? They lie easily and often, even when they don't need to. Low fear response, really good at spinning stories and good at playing the victim, lying easily and often, even when they don't need to. Oh yeah, they're also into pornography, many of them, most of the partners of the ladies that I work with, viewing women as resources and objects to use, sex objects, motivated by power, social status, money, sex. What personality disorders might be coming to mind when I do this live training? I ask therapists in the audience, tell me, how would you diagnose this type of individual? What kind, what labels would you put on them? And I get back psychopath, narcissist. And then we also have the Machiavellian, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, exploiting their partner, exploiting their weaknesses and their strengths, and the sadistic part to form the dark tetrad, enjoying causing them suffering. That's the type of person we're dealing with here. So are you really going to put them in a batterer's intervention program and do cognitive behavioral therapy with someone like this? Ellen Pence, the domestic violence advocate who gave us the power and control wheel, said that up to 25% of domestic violence offenders fall into the category of practicing antisocial violence. And she says they tend not to benefit from batterer's intervention programs. I'll tell you, they do, because they learn how to abuse without getting arrested. So it's the CEO who hides his income and forges his wife's signature on the income tax return. It's the cybersecurity expert who puts spyware on her computer. It's the doctor who tells his wife, you know how I'm going to kill you? I'm going to inject you with a poisonous solution between your toes in a way that the coroner won't even think to look. Or did you know there's more than 40 ways to kill a woman and make it look like she died from natural causes? It's the faith leader who uses scripture to justify his treatment of her and coerce her into staying in the marriage, who turns love on its head. And if you look at that passage in Corinthians, love is patient, love is kind, love keeps no record of wrongs. Abuse is the opposite of all of these things. Abuse is the opposite: impatient, cruel, envious, proud, self-serving, rude, always keeps a record of wrongs, delights in evil, does not rejoice with the truth, lies easily and often, doesn't protect, attacks, very suspicious, very jealous, and fails her where it matters the most, betrays that vow of trust and cherishing your partner. So next week, we're going to talk more about the covert abuser, coercive controller, and what happens when you have a survivor in your practice who's involved with one of these people. But I'll leave these slides with you that this is from a sermon that I went to that talks about how the Bible never justifies or condones living with an abuser. So stay tuned for next week, and we'll talk about assessments and interventions when one of your clients is dealing with covert abuse and coercive control.
Thank you so much, Ruth. We really, I mean, such a wealth of information. And we've only gotten one question so far, but I want to ask it really quick, and maybe we can open with it next week too, just in case. But in our Christian community, understanding that kind of the concepts of coercive control, what is the intersection between trying to be a good Christian wife and then navigating whether or not, it's coercive control, or that we're, trying to showing up in these ways, like love is kind, love is patient, and I'm a good Christian woman and a good Christian wife. So how do we navigate those nuances?
Yes, and that's such a great question. We will talk about it more next week. I think uh, it could fill a book, and it has filled a book. There's a book called Is It Abuse by Darby Strickland, who is a Christian author, and she has a lot of good things to say about what it is to be a Christian and to be in an abusive relationship. Something to think about is, have you pointed out to your partner something that he has done that has hurt you? And what's been the reaction? How has he responded? Has he done more of it? Has he put it back on you, minimized, denied, or has he apologized and said, oh, it'll never happen. I won't do that, but does it happen again? How does he respond when you express to your partner how he has hurt you? Have you gone to couples counseling? We'll talk about that next week, because once you determine that somebody is a covert abuser, couples counseling is not going to help. It's going to make things worse, and we'll see why next week. So no doubt, if she's smart, has empathy, self-reflection, and moral compass and conscience herself, she has left no stone unturned, trying to do whatever it takes to keep the marriage going, talking to her minister, seeing what she can do with the kids or herself to please and to keep the peace. But if he is still behaving like this, if she's working so much harder than he is, at some point, she needs to assess, am I in a relationship with a covert abuser and a covert coercive controller? That is a character issue. It's not an anger issue. It's not going to be cured by anger management or batter's intervention program, as we saw. It's a character issue. It's who and what he is. And if he's gone down that dark road, we choose light and love and God, or we choose other things like pornography, alcohol, the quick fix, power, like Lucifer over others. And if he's gone down that dark road, what does the Bible tell you? Get thee behind me, get thee away from me, Satan. And if that's what we're dealing with, darkness, evil, someone trying to not just control you, but over time, destroy you, isn't the answer pretty clear? It's about protecting yourself going forward, doing whatever you can to keep yourself and your children safe. God bless you all.